At 68, I thought I had endured every heartbreak life could throw my way. I was wrong. That April evening, a flash flood swept through my town of Willow Creek, Missouri, and washed away the little house I'd called home for over 40 years. Every wall that held my memories, my late husband Robert's laughter, my children's first steps, the garden I had tended with care was gone. I sat in my car on the muddy street, clutching a worn tote bag with the few things I had salvaged, a silver locket, my husband's journal, and a stack of family photos that somehow survived. I knew there was only one place I could go, the home of my daughter, Claire. I hoped for comfort, maybe a warm meal, perhaps a hug. Instead, when I knocked, her voice, careful and distant, met me. "Mom, we appreciate everything, but we need our space. Alex isn't comfortable with visitors right now." Space, comfort. Polite words, yet they hit like ice. My own daughter had closed the door on me. I turned back to the car, fighting tears, listening to the rain patter on the windshield. Alone, exhausted, and suddenly invisible, I realized that after all these years, life could still surprise me with its cruelties. I drove through the quiet streets of my childhood memories, each familiar corner now blurred by rain and debris. The flood had claimed everything I knew, leaving me with nothing but questions. Where would I sleep tonight? How could I recover the life I had built? My mind raced, and yet somewhere deep down, a stubborn spark refused to die. It was then in the glove compartment that my fingers brushed against something long forgotten, a faded envelope, edges frayed, with the name Henry Caldwell written in the neat, youthful script of a girl who had once believed in forever, my first love. 50 years had passed, yet the memories it carried felt alive. I almost tucked it away without thinking, but the weight of solitude pushed me to act. I dialed the number written on the card, my hands trembling. The line rang once, twice, then a voice, familiar yet aged, answered. "Eleanor, is that really you?" I gasped, my voice shaking. "Henry, it's me, Eleanor. I didn't know who else to call. My house, everything was destroyed. My daughter, she can't take me in. I'm alone." There was a pause, but not the silence of disinterest. His voice was steady, comforting. "Eleanor, stay where you are. I'm coming." I didn't argue. There was no time for doubt or hesitation. That night, huddled in my car, I realized something extraordinary. Sometimes, when life strips everything away, it makes room for what truly matters. Henry would be my anchor, if only for a while. As the hours passed, I watched the rain blur the streetlights into streams of gold and silver. I clutched the few belongings I had, feeling the weight of years, memories, and regret. But beneath it all, a fragile hope began to grow. Hope that a life that seemed shattered could still hold beauty, love, and second chances. By the time dawn broke, I knew the storm had not only taken my home, but also cleared a path towards something unexpected. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in days, I felt a pulse of courage. I had survived floods, loss, and rejection. Now maybe I could survive love rediscovered. The silver sedan rolled slowly down the slick streets of Willow Creek. My heart pounded in my chest, a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Rain streaked across the windshield, blurring the familiar shapes of the town I had known for decades. And then I saw him, Henry, stepping out, older, grayer, yet unmistakably the boy I had once loved in high school. His eyes, stormy gray and calm, scanned the lot until they found me. "Eleanor," he said gently, tapping on the car window. I rolled it down, ashamed of my wrinkled raincoat, my tired eyes, my hollow cheeks. But Henry only smiled, a warmth radiating that seemed to melt years of worry and loneliness. "You look wonderful," he said softly. It wasn't a compliment about appearance. It was about survival, resilience, the life that had endured in me despite all odds. He loaded my modest belongings, my tote bag of memories, my husband's silver journal, and a small toolbox into the trunk as though they were treasures, not remnants of loss. I climbed into the passenger seat, my hands trembling, my mind spinning with memories and questions. 50 years felt like both a heartbeat and a lifetime. The drive was surreal. Rolling hills passed by, neighborhoods glistening after the storm. The kind of world that seemed untouched by floods or misfortune. And yet, I felt a flicker of belonging beside Henry, a reminder that home isn't just a place, it's a feeling carried by those who care. His house stood behind wrought iron gates, a stone structure with wide porches and tall oak trees guarding the driveway. Elegant but understated, it spoke of permanence and care. When he led me to the guest wing, I paused, overwhelmed with the space and comfort that contrasted so sharply with my night in the car. "Make yourself comfortable, Eleanor," he said. "This house has been too quiet for too long." The first days were quiet. I tiptoed through the halls, unsure of my place. Henry's patience was endless. Mornings brought coffee on the porch as finches darted among feeders, and slowly conversation replaced silence. Afternoons were spent walking the gardens, Henry showing me his greenhouse, the orchids flourishing under his careful hand. Evenings were a return to simplicity. We cooked together, laughed quietly, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace. One night, seated by the fire, Henry told me something I had not expected. He once considered marrying someone else, he admitted, eyes tracing the flames. But I called it off. I couldn't, because it wasn't you. I felt my chest tighten. 50 years of what-ifs and regrets, now given a gentle, honest answer. The storm had taken my home, but somehow it had returned what I had never lost completely: him. It wasn't long before the world outside took notice. My daughter Claire called, hesitant at first. "Mom, where are you staying?" she asked, curiosity and concern intertwined. I told her simply, "With an old friend." Her voice carried disbelief, a subtle measure of judgment. But I remained calm. For the first time, I wasn't asking for permission to live my life. Henry became my anchor, steady and silent, reminding me daily that love doesn't demand perfection or performance. It only asks presence, patience, and care. And in that quiet, unassuming way, the weight of years seemed to lift, if only a little. By the end of the first week, I knew that the storm hadn't just taken my home, it had cleared a path toward rediscovery, toward trust, to a life that could begin again. And as Henry and I sat together on the porch one evening, sipping tea, I realized that survival wasn't enough. What I needed was connection, hope, and the courage to accept that sometimes love waits patiently, even for decades. Days turned into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Mornings with Henry became a quiet ritual, filled with the aroma of fresh coffee and the soft chatter of birds outside the windows. Afternoons were spent in the gardens, tending flowers, watching sunlight bounce off the greenhouse glass. Evenings brought laughter in the kitchen as we prepared meals side by side, our movements comfortable and unspoken. For the first time in years, I felt that life could be both safe and vibrant. Yet the outside world hadn't forgotten me. One afternoon, the phone rang, a hesitant, familiar voice. "Mom, are you really okay?" It was Claire. Her tone was careful, polite, but something beneath it hinted at unease. I explained simply, "I'm fine. I have a place to stay. I'm safe." Her next questions were cautious, almost probing. "Who is he, Henry? How long have you known him?" I could hear the curiosity wrapped in judgment, but I answered calmly, giving only what was necessary. There was no room for argument or embarrassment. I had survived floods, storms, and rejection. Now, I would survive her questions too. Evenings with Henry felt like a shield against that outside scrutiny. He never pressured me to answer, never insisted I justify my life. He simply existed as a reminder that love could be quiet, steady, and real. His hands guided mine in the garden, his laughter filled empty spaces, and his voice offered reassurance that words sometimes couldn't. But shadows of my past life lingered. Memories of my destroyed home, of nights spent in my car, of the humiliation and loneliness, it all clung stubbornly. Some nights I would wake in the guest wing, heart racing, the silence pressing in. And yet, Henry's calm presence beside me, whether I spoke or remained quiet, reminded me that the storm hadn't taken everything. It had only cleared space for something better. Then came the day Claire decided to visit. I felt my pulse quicken as the familiar car pulled into the driveway. Henry greeted her at the door, calm, confident, and polite. I followed slowly, unsure of how the meeting would unfold. Claire stepped inside, scanning the elegant home with subtle disbelief, her eyes settling on me. "Mom, this is unexpected," she said softly, her gaze flickering to Henry. "Welcome, Claire," Henry said evenly, offering a warm smile. "Make yourself comfortable." The afternoon was filled with cautious conversation, polite questions, and forced smiles. Yet beneath it all, I sensed the tension. Claire's curiosity about Henry's life, his business, and his finances was thinly veiled as concern. But Henry's steady demeanor set a boundary without confrontation. He answered truthfully when necessary, never more than required. After she left, I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The encounter reminded me that the outside world, outside our sanctuary, was not ready to accept my new life without scrutiny. But Henry's quiet reassurance steadied me. He said, "Let them wonder. You've earned your peace, Eleanor. That's what matters." That night, as we watched the stars from the porch, I realized how fragile yet resilient life could be. The storm had stripped away everything familiar, but it had also shown me the strength I carried, the capacity to embrace love again, and the courage to face family expectations without fear. Life was no longer about survival alone. It was about building something meaningful in the space that remained. And with Henry by my side, I knew I could face whatever challenges, judgments, or storms awaited. The pastel whispered, but for the first time, I felt powerful enough to listen and not be defined by it. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life with Henry became a comforting certainty. Mornings were filled with sunlight streaming through the large kitchen windows, afternoons with laughter and gardening, and evenings with quiet talks by the fireplace. Each day reminded me that despite loss and loneliness, life could still surprise me with moments of beauty. Yet, reality always finds a way to intrude. One evening, the phone rang. It was Claire. I hesitated, but answered. "Mom, I've been thinking." Her voice carried a careful tone, masking uncertainty. "Maybe I was too quick to judge. Can we meet? I want to understand." I felt a mixture of relief and caution. Relief that my daughter was willing to engage, caution because I knew that curiosity often masks judgment. Henry, ever perceptive, noticed the hesitation in my eyes. "Shall we invite her for tea?" he asked softly. I nodded. The next afternoon, Claire arrived. Henry greeted her at the door with calm politeness, and I followed, feeling a flutter of nerves I hadn't expected. The first minutes were polite, measured. Claire's questions, at first seemingly innocent, soon revealed their true nature. Subtle probes about Henry's finances, his lifestyle, and whether I was taking advantage of him. Henry, with the quiet firmness, set boundaries without confrontation. "Claire, I've known your mother for decades. My intentions are honest, and my life is mine. Your mother is not a burden. She is cherished, and I choose to be here with her." Her eyes widened, surprise and embarrassment flickering across her face. For a moment, the conversation faltered. I realized that Henry's calm authority had shifted the dynamic. She could no longer approach with judgment masked as concern. Over the next few weeks, Claire's visits became frequent, though less tense. She began to see Henry not just as a new figure in my life, but as someone who genuinely cared for me. Still, every interaction carried an undercurrent of testing. Quiet questions, lingering glances, subtle comparisons. Through it all, Henry remained a steadfast presence. He never rushed me, never pushed me to justify myself. His confidence created a protective space where I could rebuild my own sense of worth. Slowly, I began to reclaim my independence, learning that love could coexist with boundaries and that family could accept new realities at their own pace. One afternoon, as we tended the greenhouse, Henry spoke softly. "The storm took more than your house, Eleanor. It shook your sense of safety, your trust, even your expectations of family. But it also gave you a choice, to accept life as it comes, to find joy in the present." I nodded, realizing how much I had grown in a few short weeks. The past no longer dictated my days. The memory of lost walls, lost belongings, and moments of humiliation had faded into perspective. What remained was love, connection, and the courage to navigate family dynamics with grace. By the end of the month, Claire's attitude had softened. Though she occasionally tested boundaries, her visits became a bridge rather than a battlefield. I realized that family, like love, sometimes requires patience and understanding, not just from us, but from them as well. The storm had destroyed my house, but it had cleared the path for rebuilding relationships, rediscovering love, and finding resilience I didn't know I still possessed. And as Henry and I sat on the porch one evening, watching the golden sunset wash over the garden, I understood a truth that had been elusive for decades. Survival is not enough. To truly live, we must embrace connection, courage, and the quiet joy of being seen and cherished. By now, life had settled into a rhythm that felt both new and comforting. Mornings with Henry brought the aroma of fresh coffee and the quiet songs of finches in the garden. Afternoons were spent tending orchids and roses, while evenings were filled with laughter and conversation as we cooked dinner side by side. For the first time since the storm, I felt truly at home. But the past, as always, refused to stay buried. Claire's curiosity had grown. Her visits were polite but probing, each question about Henry's career, investments, and our daily routine laced with subtle judgment. I had learned to answer calmly, revealing only what was necessary. Henry never intervened unnecessarily, yet his presence created a quiet authority that shifted the dynamic in our favor. One afternoon, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Henry spoke softly. "Eleanor, the world outside can never fully understand what you've endured, but you don't need anyone's permission to live, to be happy." His words sank deeply into my heart. For years, I had measured my worth by the approval of others, family, friends, even strangers. The storm had stripped all that away, leaving only the raw truth, my resilience and capacity to love. Henry's calm reassurance reminded me that I could embrace life on my own terms. Yet tension lingered. Claire's next visit was more pointed. She observed every detail, from the neat arrangement of the guest wing to the care Henry took in preparing meals. "Mom, are you sure this is safe?" she asked, her voice layered with concern and doubt. I took a deep breath. "Safe, Claire. Yes. And more importantly, I am happy. Isn't that what matters?" She hesitated, her eyes searching mine, as though trying to reconcile the mother she had always known with the woman I had become. Henry, quietly standing nearby, offered a small, supportive smile. His calm presence reminded me that I no longer needed to defend myself alone. That evening, after Claire left, Henry and I walked through the gardens. The air was crisp, the scent of earth and flowers grounding me in a way I hadn't felt in years. You see, Eleanor, life isn't about avoiding storms. It's about learning to dance in the rain, to find beauty even in chaos. I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The storm had destroyed my house, yes, but it had cleared the way for something far greater. A life filled with love, stability, and the courage to rebuild relationships on my own terms. The next week brought a surprise. Claire called, her tone softer, more tentative. "Mom, I wanted to apologize if I was too harsh. I didn't understand. I see now. You're happy." I smiled, a warmth spreading through me. "Thank you, Claire. That means more than you know." It was a small victory, a subtle shift in the tides of family dynamics. The storm had taught me many lessons about loss, about resilience, and about the enduring power of love. With Henry by my side, I was no longer defined by what had been taken from me. Instead, I was defined by the life I was creating, the love I was rediscovering, and the courage to face whatever challenges might come. That night, as we sat by the fireplace, Henry took my hand gently. "Eleanor, the past is gone, but the future, that's ours to shape, together." For the first time in years, I truly believed him. The storm had ended, but life, with all its surprises, had just begun. Weeks had passed since Claire's tentative acceptance, and life with Henry had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Mornings with coffee on the porch, afternoons in the greenhouse, evenings preparing meals together. It all felt like a dream I hadn't dared imagine. For the first time in decades, I felt seen, cherished, and alive. Yet the past has a way of creeping back when you least expect it. One brisk autumn afternoon, a knock at the door startled me. Standing there was Claire, alone, her eyes reflecting a mixture of apprehension and resolve. "Mom, I think it's time we talked," she said. Henry, ever composed, stepped aside, letting me greet her. I felt my heart tighten. The memories of past judgments, subtle accusations, and the rejection I had faced in Overland Park surfaced like ghosts. But I was no longer the woman who had curled into herself with despair. I squared my shoulders and invited her inside. We sat in the living room, the golden light of the late afternoon streaming through the windows. Claire's questions started cautiously, polite on the surface, but beneath them lurked scrutiny. "Mom, I want to understand Henry's role in your life. Are you safe with him? Is he taking advantage?" I took a deep breath, meeting her gaze with calm firmness. "Claire, Henry is not just safe. He is kind, steady, and he values me for who I am. No one is taking advantage of me. I am choosing to live fully, and he is part of that choice." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she nodded slowly, as though weighing my words against the image she had held for so long. The silence stretched, heavy but necessary. Henry, sitting quietly beside me, offered reassurance with a gentle squeeze of my hand. As the conversation continued, Claire's tone softened, revealing vulnerability she rarely displayed. I I didn't understand before. I judged too quickly. Seeing you here, thriving, I realized I misjudged your choices. Relief and pride swelled within me. For years, I had carried the weight of expectations, the fear of judgment from those I loved. Now, in this moment, I felt a measure of release. The storm had taken my home, but it had cleared space for honesty, courage, and renewal. By the end of the visit, Claire's demeanor had changed. She left with a promise to approach the future with understanding, a subtle shift signaling that bridges could be rebuilt even after years of tension. That evening, as Henry and I walked through the gardens under a sky streaked with pink and orange, he spoke softly. "Eleanor, the storms of life test us, not to break us, but to show us what truly matters. You've survived loss, rejection, and loneliness. Now, you are building something enduring." I nodded, the truth settling in my chest. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. I was not defined by loss or judgment. I was defined by resilience, love, and the courage to embrace a future I had never thought possible. Later, as we watched the stars from the porch, I realized that life's storms, literal and metaphorical, had taught me invaluable lessons. Family, love, and personal dignity were not possessions to be lost or gained. They were foundations to be nurtured and cherished. For the first time, I felt a profound sense of safety, not just in the world Henry and I had created, but within myself. The storm had destroyed much, but it had also given me the opportunity to discover what truly mattered: connection, respect, and a love that could weather any tempest. Life had settled into a gentle rhythm, though not without its surprises. Mornings began with the soft aroma of brewing coffee, accompanied by the gentle chatter of finches outside the porch. Henry moved around the kitchen with practiced ease, while I watched, appreciating how the smallest routines had become rituals of comfort. It was in these quiet moments that I realized how deeply I had missed feeling ordinary happiness. There was no storm today, no crisis, just the simplicity of being alive and seen. And yet, Every small victory carried a weight of triumph. Making the first cup of coffee for Henry, tending the roses without rushing, finishing a crossword puzzle by the window, all became milestones of reclaiming my independence. Even family interactions became subtly rewarding. Claire's phone calls, once tense and probing, had softened. She asked questions that hinted at genuine concern rather than judgment. "Mom, did you plant any new flowers this week? Henry mentioned the greenhouse," she said one afternoon. I smiled, realizing that the storm had not only reshaped my home, but also reshaped my daughter's perspective. Henry's presence remained my anchor. He never flaunted his success, nor did he insist on being the center of attention. Instead, his love was quiet, consistent, and nurturing. We found joy in shared meals, long walks through the property, and evenings by the fireplace. One night, as we prepared dinner together, he paused and said softly, "Eleanor, every day you show courage. You rebuild not just walls, but life itself." I felt warmth flood my chest. Rebuilding life after the storm had not been about possessions. It had been about reclaiming self-worth, finding joy, and learning that love could exist without drama or expectation. Henry's steady support reminded me daily that I was worthy, not because of what I owned, but because of who I was. Yet subtle tension lingered in the background. Occasionally, Claire's visits brought moments of unease. She would glance at Henry with curiosity, sometimes lingering too long on his possessions or the way he moved about the house. I learned to breathe through these moments, understanding that her questions came from protective instincts, not malice. Henry, sensing my discomfort, would offer a quiet reassurance, a hand on my shoulder, a small nod, reminding me that we were together in facing this delicate dynamic. One afternoon, a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, stopped by with baked goods. Seeing her, I realized how far I had come. Only a few weeks ago, I had been alone in a Walmart parking lot, clutching my suitcase and the remnants of my life. Now, neighbors visited, friends checked in, and my daughter's demeanor had softened. These small victories, unnoticed by the outside world, mattered most. As autumn deepened, the golden leaves and crisp air became a backdrop to our rebuilding. I began journaling again, capturing not just the trauma of loss, but also the triumphs, the laughter, and the quiet victories of daily life. Writing became a form of therapy, a way to recognize progress that otherwise might have gone uncelebrated. One evening, as Henry and I sat by the fireplace with mugs of tea in hand, he smiled and said, "Eleanor, the storm gave us destruction, but also clarity. You are stronger than you realize, and every day you show it." I nodded, feeling a sense of completion and hope. The house, though still healing, was more than a structure. It was a symbol of resilience. Our love, steady and patient, was a fortress against the uncertainties of life. And family, though complex, was learning to accept change, just as we had learned to embrace it. In that quiet moment, I understood a profound truth. Happiness is not always grand or immediate. Sometimes it is found in small victories, in moments of understanding, in shared cups of coffee, and the knowledge that after a storm, life can still bloom in unexpected ways. Just as life had settled into a comforting rhythm, the universe reminded me that stability is never permanent. One chilly November morning, Henry and I were tending the greenhouse, carefully inspecting the orchids he had nurtured for years. The air smelled of damp earth and falling leaves, a reminder that seasons change, and with them, life often shifts unexpectedly. I was trimming a delicate pink orchid when the phone rang. Henry answered, and I watched the lines form on his forehead as he listened. After a few moments, he hung up, his calm expression replaced by something I hadn't seen before, concern. "Eleanor, we have a problem," he said gently, turning toward me. I felt a chill, though the air was mild. "What kind of problem?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "It's about the property next door," he explained. "There's been a legal dispute. Some developers want to buy it and are threatening to expand. It could affect the greenhouse, the gardens, everything we've built." My heart sank. The sanctuary Henry and I had carefully crafted, the safe haven after the tornado, the refuge that had allowed me to heal, was suddenly under threat. Memories of loss from the past flashed in my mind, and I felt the familiar pang of fear and helplessness. We spent the afternoon reviewing documents, making phone calls, and consulting with lawyers. Henry's calm demeanor helped anchor me, but the tension was undeniable. This wasn't a natural disaster like the tornado that had once torn my life apart. It was a battle with bureaucracy and ambition, and it felt merciless. That evening, as we sat by the fireplace, Henry spoke softly, sensing my worry. "Eleanor, I know this feels overwhelming, but remember, you've survived storms before, literal and figurative. We will face this together, just as we always have." I nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. The memory of being turned away by my son years ago and then finding support in Henry reminded me that resilience is built in moments of challenge, not comfort. The next few days were a whirlwind. Meetings, calls, and negotiations filled our schedule. Claire, sensing my anxiety, reached out, not with judgment, but concern. "Mom, do you need help?" she asked. I paused, considering. "Yes, Claire, your support would mean a lot," I replied, feeling the shift in our relationship. She offered practical advice, helped organize documents, and even spoke with the legal team. I realized then that some storms are best faced together, and that family, when willing, can transform from a source of tension to a pillar of strength. Late one night, after a particularly long day, Henry and I stood in the garden under the stars. The greenhouse loomed behind us, a symbol of everything we had built. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "no matter what happens, remember that this place, this life, it is ours, and we will protect it, together." I smiled, despite the exhaustion and uncertainty. The storm was not over, not by any means, but I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life, I realized, is not defined by the challenges that come our way, but how we respond to them. As I went to bed that night, I felt a mixture of fear and determination. The battle ahead would test us in ways we had never imagined. Yet for the first time in years, I felt ready to face whatever came next. The past had taught me resilience. Henry had shown me love, and together we were prepared to weather this unexpected storm. The days that followed were tense, but revealing. The legal dispute over the neighboring property escalated, and for the first time since the tornado, I felt that old, gnawing fear, the sense that life could collapse again in an instant. But this time, I wasn't alone. Henry was steady, calm, and methodical, tackling every call, every document, every obstacle with patience that anchored me. One crisp morning, after another long night of negotiations, Henry placed a hand on my shoulder. "Eleanor, it's time to take a breath," he said gently. I realized he was right. I had been so absorbed in the storm outside that I had forgotten to honor the strength I had built inside. Claire had continued to assist from afar, her concern genuine this time. "Mom, you've shown me what courage looks like," she said over the phone. Hearing her words, I felt a warmth in my chest. The rift between us, long shaped by misunderstandings and judgments, was beginning to heal. For the first time, I sensed the possibility of an honest, supportive relationship with my daughter. The breakthrough came when the developers, confronted with legal resistance in Henry's meticulous planning, finally agreed to a compromise. The greenhouse and gardens would remain untouched, while the adjacent land could be used minimally, respecting the integrity of our property. Relief washed over me like sunlight after a stormy night. That evening, Henry and I walked through the gardens, the air crisp with early winter. He looked at me, eyes soft with admiration. Eleanor, you've faced more in these past months than most do in years. Your resilience isn't just inspiring, it's transformative. You've not only survived storms, you've mastered them. I smiled, feeling the weight of past fears lift. The storm had tested me, pushed me to the edge, and yet here I was, not just surviving, but thriving. Life had taught me that strength isn't only about enduring hardship. It's about embracing change, trusting others, and valuing oneself. Family dynamics began to shift as well. Claire visited in person, her demeanor different from before, less guarded, more open. She brought gifts, yes, but also conversations that revealed genuine curiosity and care. "Mom, how's the greenhouse today?" she asked, genuinely interested. "Are the roses thriving?" I realized that the measure of reconciliation is not perfection, but sincerity. Our past could not be erased, but it could be acknowledged, respected, and used as the foundation for a healthier relationship. One quiet evening, Henry and I sat by the fireplace, sipping tea. "Eleanor," he said softly, "sometimes storms arrive to teach us what matters most. You've discovered what is truly load-bearing in life: love, dignity, respect, and resilience. Everything else is decoration." I nodded, the truth resonating deeply. My journey had been painful, yes, but it had led me to this moment, one of security, love, and clarity. I felt an inner peace I hadn't known since the days before Harold passed, before my world had been upended. And as I looked around the home that Henry and I were building together, I realized that every trial, every moment of despair, had contributed to my growth. The storms, both natural and personal, had stripped away illusions and forced me to recognize what truly mattered. And in that clarity, I discovered something profound. Life's storms are inevitable, but they are also opportunities. Opportunities to grow, to reconnect, and to embrace the beauty of a life rebuilt with intention and love. I no longer measured my worth by the approval of others. I measured it by the peace, resilience, and genuine connections I cultivated. And for the first time in decades, I felt fully, completely alive. Winter had melted into spring, and the world around Prairie Creek Way bloomed with new life. Henry and I walked through the gardens, the orchids and roses vibrant after months of careful tending. I marveled at how far we had come, from chaos to stability, from uncertainty to home. The days were now filled with simple pleasures that had once seemed impossible. Mornings began with sunlight streaming through the wide windows, Henry brewing coffee as I watched the birds flit between feeders. Afternoons were spent in the greenhouse or on gentle walks across the property. Evenings brought us together in the kitchen or by the fireplace, sharing stories and laughter. Every routine, once mundane, now carried profound meaning. Love, I realized, is not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It is quiet, steady, and unwavering. Henry's presence had taught me that age is no barrier to discovering happiness, to building a life rooted in care and respect. He never demanded anything, never overshadowed my past, and always celebrated my strength. I felt cherished in a way I had never imagined possible at 67. Family dynamics had shifted too. Claire's visits became more frequent, no longer tinged with suspicion or judgment. Her tone was warmer, her questions genuine. "Mom, you look so happy," she said one afternoon, glancing at the flowers I tended. I realized that the love I had nurtured with Henry was extending outward. helping to mend old wounds and build trust with the people I once feared had left me behind. Evan, though still distant at times, began to engage more authentically. The conversations about investments and business faded, replaced by questions about my well-being, my hobbies, and the simple joys of life. I could see the lessons he had learned about respect, about boundaries, and about the importance of love untainted by expectation. Then came the day Henry took my hands in his storm gray eyes meeting mine. "Eleanor, I do not want to spend another day without knowing you are my wife," he said, his voice calm yet filled with emotion. There was no spectacle, no need for grand dramatics, just the two of us, standing on the porch, overlooking the gardens we had cultivated together. I smiled, tears welling in my eyes. "Yes," I whispered, knowing that this was not just a marriage, but a testament to the resilience we had both shown. A quiet ceremony followed in the back garden, under the soft light of a crisp spring morning. Only close friends and Henry's longtime associate attended. I wore a simple blue dress, Henry a charcoal suit. The vows were personal, honest, and profound, reflecting not performance, but truth. Life after the wedding continued its gentle rhythm. We laughed over morning coffee, walked through the gardens, tended to orchids, and shared quiet evenings by the fire. I hummed while cooking, feeling the simple joy of being needed and appreciated. The trauma of the tornado, the heartbreak from my son's initial rejection, all of it had become part of the story that led me here. I had learned to measure my worth not by the approval of others, but by the peace I felt within. Love and companionship, dignity and respect, and the courage to start anew, these were the foundations of a life rebuilt. The storms of the past had stripped away superficialities, revealing what truly mattered. Even Evan, slowly, began to understand. Our conversations were honest, less rehearsed, and more heartfelt. He visited occasionally, offering glimpses of the son I had once known, tempered now by awareness and understanding. Sloane, it seemed, had disappeared from the narrative entirely, leaving only room for genuine connections. As I stood on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip behind the tall oaks, I realized something profound. Losing everything gave me the chance to find everything I truly needed: love, respect, stability, and a partner who cherished me, not for what I could give, but for who I was. The tornado had destroyed a house, but it had also cleared space for a life richer than I had imagined. At 67, I had learned that beginnings can come at any age, that happiness is built in small, consistent moments, and that love, quiet, steadfast, and real, can arrive when you least expect it. And as the stars appeared above Prairie Creek Way, I whispered a quiet thank you to the universe. For the first time in decades, I felt fully, completely, and utterly at home.